Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Michelle Saga and I am the crafty chick behind Chell's Beads. In today's video, we are going to be making these beautiful Glam Faux stained glass heart coasters that have pops of glitter, gold foil, and one of my new favorite things to play around with, fantasy foam. So as always, everything will be listed and linked in the description box below. And if you guys are ready to get started with this fun project, let's go. To get started with this, you are going to need 4 silicone coaster molds. I got these off of Amazon and I will make sure to have them listed and linked in the description box. Then you are going to need some beautiful opal glitter. I will be using Waterfalls from Diamond and Dust and 100 milliliters of mixed epoxy. Keep in mind that this volume of epoxy does take a little bit of time to mix, so I pre-mixed this so that we didn't waste too much time with that. As you can see here, this is a gorgeous chunky blend. I feel like this adds quite a lot to the project. I do go ahead and divide this up into 2 different silicone cups just to make it easier to gauge how much I'm pouring in each mold, because I need to make sure that I have enough. I sprinkle about 1/8 of an inch of glitter onto the top and then quickly stir this in. The resin has been sitting for just a couple of minutes, so it is thick enough that it will suspend this glitter and not make it fall to the bottom of the mold. Basically, you want to make sure that your glitter is suspended, and it's okay if the consistency changes a little bit of this resin, because unlike putting it on a tumbler, this is going into a mold. What you saw me do there was spray this mold with a little bit of alcohol first. This helps with air bubbles that may not rise to the surface so that we get a nice, beautiful finish to our coasters. I'm going to divide that cup up into these 2 molds, and because this is only our first layer of this pour, it's going to not completely spread to the edges, so just take one of your stir sticks and coax all of that resin into all of those little nooks and crannies of the mold. Once you have your mold filled to your liking, go ahead and do the same for the other 2 molds off to the side. As you can see here, I'm just quickly pouring it in, and I will be smoothing these out the same way as the first 2. Once you have all your resin into your molds the way that you like it, you can go ahead and hit it with just a very light little brushing of your torch to pop any bubbles. I usually let it sit for a while before we do that. Go ahead and let that cure overnight, and in the meantime, we will be using our heart template to create our stained glass hearts. I got this image off of Google, but I will have it already sized and ready to go into a Google Docs that will be available in my Facebook group. So make sure that you join that so you have access to the files, and also come and hang out with us. So now we are going to be using this purple fantasy film. I got this off of Amazon, but this is really popular in the mixed media world and anywhere where you want that dichroic glass look. So we will be taking this, roughly cutting out a square, and then just kind of using our scissors to cut this out so that we have a template piece. Go ahead and cut this out 4 times so that you have enough for each one of your molds. Once we have our little hearts ready, we will be ready to add them to our coasters. Keep in mind, you want to check your template first just to make sure that you've cut out all of your lines correctly. And you also want to make sure that your coaster is cured enough that you can rest your hand or the tip of our dimensional paint onto the coaster. I let these sit overnight, so they roughly cure for about 12 to 18 hours. You're going to go ahead and take your hearts and you're going to place them in the center of your coaster. These do have a static electricity type of a feel to them, so you don't need any kind of adhesive to hold them down. They will naturally want to stay in place on top of that resin. Go ahead and add your hearts to each one of the molds, and then we will move into tracing our faux stained glass lines or faux lead caming onto our hearts. To do this, you're going to want to take a light pad. I am using a Cricut Bright pad, but any light table that you have will work. Go ahead and cut out a second template, but this time don't cut the heart out, just cut a square, and then place your coaster over top. You will want to make sure that you have some kind of light source because these coasters are not transparent and you will not be able to see the lines otherwise. For our faux lead caming, we will be using Paveo dimensional paint. This is a multi-surface paint that is designed to be used on any hard non-porous surface, and it's great because it does not react with the resin. It will hold that dimension even with the pouring of the resin on top. I do recommend before you start drawing your lines that you play with this a little bit. This is more like applying a line of icing to a cookie instead of drawing a line on a piece of paper. I would take a piece of wax paper and your template and practice that way. You might waste a little product, but I promise you it's a lot easier to do that than have the headache of trying to remove this paint from the resin and the fantasy film. Just in case, I always have a couple of backup pieces of the film in case I do really make a mess up and I have to start over. So what you see me doing here is outlining any of the black line areas with this fine liner. Now you can make your lines as thick or as thin as you would like. I was going for a very thin, consistent line, but it really just depends on how you want this to look. I also work in sections and do line segments where I try to trace a single line segment first, stop, and then rotate my mold so that I'm able to have a good steady hand to draw that next line. Because this is a very geometric shape and has those facets, I don't want any real curves because I think that that just kind of messes up that whole look. So here you see me going in to fix a little blob that I had. The easiest way to do this is with one of your silicone tip tools. You can just manipulate it around and then wipe off the tip of your tool. Don't overthink it or overwork it because you risk smudging the entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and speed up the rest of this footage because really it's just me continuing to draw the lines in this heart, and it is kind of tedious and really the longest part of this entire thing. So I will keep it at regular speed while I add the first few lines within the heart and then speed it up so we can get on to the fun decorating part. I wanted to add that it seems to be easier to draw from south to north with this tube of paint than it is to drag it north to south, if that makes any sense. It was easier to reference a compass when trying to explain this, and it is easier to go from left to right versus right to left. This may be different if you are left-handed. I am right-handed, and I just thought I would point that out in case you are having any struggles or trying to figure out what direction to start your line. Keep in mind, I rotate this constantly to make sure that I am working as comfortably as possible. I know it's hard to see here, but those lines are actually very visible and you shouldn't have any problem with rotating your piece in order to see what you are doing. Here you see me fixing my lines again, and I took a different approach there and I pushed the excess paint back towards the line, and that worked out much better. Here you also see me continuing to squeeze air towards the front of the tube. You do have to do this periodically to avoid getting a big air bubble splatter in your line of paint. Anytime you feel like there's some resistance, go ahead and put the cap back on the tube, and from the bottom, go ahead and squeeze up. Then when you take the tube off, you should have a nice fine line. Please excuse my big ol' head in there. With this, I did have to lean over consistently to go ahead and see what I was doing, so I apologize for that. You also want to keep some baby wipes or wet wipes handy to wipe off the tip of your little tube here, because it does get kind of gunky the more you work with it and the more lines that you add. When you are done, it should look something like this. And now we're going to let this dry for about an hour. And once it's all dry, we're going to move on to creating our beautiful gilded border. To do this, I'm using two different colors of what I like to call luster dust. One of them is from Diamond and Dust, and I believe it's called Gilded. Don't quote me on that. I will have the actual product listed down below with the name. But I want to take a popsicle stick and scoop out about 2 generous scoopfuls to start off with. Then I'm going to take this edible glitter that my sister gave me, and it's a very, very fine gold, just a little brassier than the luster dust. And these two combined are going to give me a lot of dimension and sparkle. To apply this, we're going to be using my Liquitex Gloss Medium. This is one of my favorite mediums when I want to apply some kind of external design to my resin, and I need it to kind of stay in place and not shift around while it's drying. It's a pretty quick drying medium and allows me to get a lot of color in detail. So in order to accomplish this, I need the right consistency. I go ahead and test a little bit. If it's too runny or the particles of the luster dust are pooling, I go ahead and add just a little bit more luster dust to it just to thicken it up. I also go ahead and balance it out with a little more glitter. This is all an eyeballing technique. Basically, you want it thick enough that it's not going to pool and run all over the place, and that you're going to get good coverage. So I'm going to take a fine liner brush here, and I'm using kind of a dabbing technique where I'm picking up a little puddle of paint on the end of my brush, and then using the edge of my mold as a guide, I am putting roughly a 1/4 of an inch border around this mold. This is going to be the first step to our gilding process, and really what we're kind of laying down is an adhesive layer for our gold foil. You're going to do this all around the edge of the piece, and I like to work on each coaster separately before I move on, because you don't want to risk this drying before you're able to apply your gold flakes. Now you're going to take a pair of tweezers and you're going to take pieces of this gold flake. The gold flake sticks to just about everything except for where you want it to stick. So my best advice is to take a pair of tweezers that you can easily clean off and pick up a couple of pieces of gold foil on your fingers and then lift it off with the tweezers. I don't like to dip the tweezers in the container because you risk contaminating that gloss medium onto other pieces of foil. What you're basically going to be doing is laying this foil down onto that gloss medium and luster dust mixture that we created. I'm going for a very organic feel here, almost like little clusters of this gold foil, and the gloss medium is going to act like the adhesive for this so that it doesn't shift around when we go to pour our next layer of resin. I tried this a couple of different ways because I really wanted this gold gilded edge, but I also didn't want to add any gold when the piece was done because I felt like it kept the light from reflecting against all of that opal glitter. This ended up being the best way to accomplish that. Alternatively, you could use small little crushed pieces of glass, anything that you feel gives it that special bling touch. I do kind of go in with my tweezers and work some of those larger pieces in just so they're not sticking up too much out of the resin. The one reason for that is we won't really be able to sand this down and fix that. So once that layer is dry, I let it dry for about an hour. I mixed up 100 milliliters of epoxy again, and this time we are just going to coat each one of our coasters. I did have a little mix up with the weather when I was filming this the first time, so unfortunately only 3 of these coasters survived. What you see me doing here is just adding this flood coat, and all it is to cap off all of those designs that we have added to the coaster so far. You're going to hit it with your torch just a little bit and then let it sit and cure. Now that it's cured, we're going to be adding more resin. This mold was very deep, so this took several pours to get it to be the right height that I wanted it to. Alternatively, you could have left it at whatever level you wanted as long as your gold foil was covered and smooth and move straight onto a doming coat. For me, I wanted these to be nice and sturdy, so I went ahead and pretty much filled until my mold was pretty much filled to the top. This also ensures that I have no pokey bits from that gold sticking up out of the mold and just allows me to get that really nice deep finish to these coasters. Once you have that applied, go ahead and pick it up and let gravity help you get all of that resin into all of those little nooks and crannies. Then you're going to want to make sure these are set on a level surface to cure. And once they're cured, we are going to demold them and add our doming top coat. Once our doming top coat is done, these babies will be ready to cure and use. So to add our doming top coat, I am going to be adding about 20 milliliters of epoxy to the tops of each one of these. I am going to be using my plastic popsicle stick here to drag it out from the center towards the edges. What was really hard to capture here on the camera is how I use the edges of the coasters to help me get this. There will be a small little lip from where the resin shrank a little bit in the mold, and you just want to kind of drag this right up to that edge, and this will give us that really nice domed effect to our piece. If you do have a resin edge trimmer, this would be a good time to use it, but I honestly don't have one, and with all the shapes of this mold, I figured it would be kind of difficult to use. Once this doming layer dries and cures, you are left with a beautiful set of coasters. So here are the finished pieces. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video, guys. I cannot wait to see all the gorgeous ones that you make, so make sure to tag me in social media. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like, comment, do all those awesome things. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you want to watch my last video, go ahead and click here, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay creative, guys.